This episode is brought to you by Vikings, War of Clans. This game is inspired by the famous strategy and RPG games of the 90s that we all loved and played, like Age of Empires. What makes Vikings World so addictive is that more than 20 million online players are constantly changing the way the game evolves. With their never-ending fighting over resources, forging of new alliances, and competing in exciting live events. Help support the Simple History channel by downloading Vikings for free from the link in the description box below and get a special bonus of 200 gold coins and a protective shield, which will be an extremely useful head start. Don't forget to look me up and join my Vikings clan under my nickname, Simple History. The pilot who shot down a plane with a pistol while parachuting. On March 31st, 1943, 12 B-24 Liberator bombers of the U.S. 7th Bombardment Group were deployed from their base in Pendaveswar, India, to bomb a bridge in Pyongyang, Burma. This was not an unusual mission for the 7th Bombardment Group, as they regularly flew missions aimed at disrupting Japanese supply chains in Burma. When on the way there, they were suddenly intercepted by 13 Japanese Ki-43 Peregrine Falcon fighters who mercilessly tore into the American bomber formation. One of the B-24s was badly hit and caught on fire, forcing the crew to bail out moments before the bomber exploded. As the crew parachuted downward to Earth, the attacking Japanese planes started to strafe the defenseless Americans, killing 2 of them. One of the crew parachuting downwards under a hail of enemy fire was the co-pilot of the bomber, Second Lieutenant Owen J. Baggett, who was hit and slightly wounded in his arm. The injured Baggett landed on the ground, and along with a fellow crew member, he took cover in the trees as the Japanese aircraft started to strafe them. Later that day, they were captured by Japanese forces, and Baggett spent the next 2 years in a prisoner of war camp, first in Rangoon and then in Singapore. This we can all take as fact, as there is official paperwork and witness statements to back this all up. But what happened during Lieutenant Baggett's descent down to the ground is something we only have his word for. As Baggett descended downward by parachute, he was hit in the arm as the Japanese planes mercilessly attacked him and his fellow crew members. Baggett decided to play dead, hoping to fool the enemy fighters into leaving him alone. A Japanese pilot then slowed down at around 4,000 feet with its canopy open and approached Baggett, who was hanging limply. Baggett took the opportunity to draw his service M1911A1 automatic pistol and, in anger, fired 4 times at the exposed Japanese pilot. Moments later, the enemy plane seemed to stall and spiral downwards. But in all the mayhem, Baggett didn't see what finally happened to it. Baggett claimed he had not known that he had supposedly shot down the aircraft until some time later, when a U.S. Colonel Harry Melton passed through the POW camp he was being held at. Melton explained that a Japanese intelligence officer had told him that on that day Baggett was shot down, a Ki-43 from the engagement had crashed and burned. But the dead pilot had been thrown clear of his plane. On examination of the body, it had been found that the pilot had been killed by a single bullet wound. Baggett said Colonel Melton had intended to make an official report of the incident, but there is no record he ever did. This could be easily explained away by the fact that later Melton was on a Japanese transport ship being transferred to Japan when it was torpedoed and sunk on September 12, 1944 by USS Sea Lion, an American submarine. 2 days later, while adrift on a lifeboat, he and other survivors were machine-gunned down by a Japanese destroyer. There is no record or other witnesses to Baggett and Melton meeting, but it was probable as they were both in the Singapore POW camp at the same time. But if it was not Baggett who didn't shoot down the Japanese aircraft, then who did? As there were no Allied fighters in that area that day. No one seemed to consider it could have been from friendly fire, possibly from the overexcited other Japanese aircraft that were trying to hit Baggett's parachuting crew members. The story goes that the Japanese colonel was adamant that this was the pilot Owen Baggett had fired at, but no explanation was given as to how he knew this. There have been some discrepancies in the retelling of the story over the years, but they have been minor and they don't really distract from the overall story. Some had stated Baggett used a revolver and not a semi-automatic, while others claimed he was a first lieutenant and not a second lieutenant. And the most common discrepancy was it was often claimed that he was attacked by Mitsubishi A6M0s and not Nakajima Ki-43 fighters that were in the area at the same time. This could be easily explained away as both aircraft looked very similar and the Ki-43 was often mistaken for being a Zero by American pilots. The dead body of the Japanese pilot being thrown clear of his crashed aircraft could have happened, but sounds a bit far-fetched and convenient. Could it be possible that the pilot had circled Bagot and simply stalled? Again possible, but unlikely, as the Ki-43 had an exceptionally low stall speed when compared to other fighters. It was around 72 miles an hour, as opposed to the P-51D Mustang, which was 100 miles per hour. Also, the Ki-43 was seen spiraling downwards, either out of control or having stalled. If it had stalled between 4,000 to 5,000 feet, standard flight school training procedure teaches pilots how to recover from a stall, as long as you still have 3,000 feet of altitude. Would the canopy have been open? Even discounting the theory that the canopy was open for the pilot to take a better look at Bagot's supposedly dead body floating downwards, pilots often had their canopy open for a number of reasons, such as to aid navigation or to allow for quick bailout in battle. It could also get uncomfortably hot inside the canopy, especially in the Pacific theater of war. The firearm Bagot was said to use was the Colt M1911A1, which was the standard personal defense weapon carried by U.S. officers at the time. It fired the powerful .45 caliber, and the weapon magazine carried 7 rounds. It was semi-automatic, so it could fire rapidly. If the plane came straight on, it may have been possible for Bagot to accurately hit the pilot, but if it came in at another angle, it would be far harder, if not impossible. So, has it ever happened before? There were accounts during the opening stages of World War I of pilots exchanging fire at one another with handheld pistols and rifles. On April 25, 1945, right at the end of the war in Europe, there was an encounter between 2 unarmed reconnaissance planes, a German Fi-156 Stork and an American L-4 Grasshopper, and was one of the very last dogfights of the war on the Western Front. As the L-4 was unarmed, the pilot and co-pilots opened-fired with their Service 45 semi-automatics at the German aircraft, injuring one of the German crew members and forcing them to land and be captured. So what did really happen on that fateful day on March 31, 1943? Did Bagot fire off a lucky shot and down an enemy fighter? Was all the evidence of this remarkable event lost in the chaos of war? Or was it simply a tall story embellished and turned into an urban legend after countless retelling by the media? Subscribe and click the notification bell for more history videos.